Coming up on Network Africa, Senegalese President Macky Sall urges for stricter security measures to tackle political unrest. Kenya and Uganda increase surveillance on borders with Tanzania after Marburg virus deaths. Plus, South Africa to consult Russia over President Putin's arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. Senegalese President Macky Sall has urged police to take all appropriate measures to beef up security following deadly protests over the trial of opposition leader Ousmane Sonko. At least one person has died in the clashes between Mr. Sonko's supporters and the police. There have been protests in cities across the country over Mr. Sonko's trial on accusations of defaming the tourism minister, a member of Mr. Sall's party. Mr. Sonko, however, claims the real purpose of the trial is to disqualify him from running for the presidency in next year's elections. Kenya's media regulator has threatened to withdraw broadcast licenses of local media houses if they don't exercise caution while covering opposition protests. It comes as police engage the protesters in running battles in the capital, Nairobi. One university student was reportedly shot dead by police in the western town of Kisumu. The opposition accuses the government of being illegitimate and of failing to tackle the high cost of living. Local media covered the protest live, including airing clashes between police and demonstrators. In a statement, the Communications Authority of Kenya said at least 6 TV stations violated the programming code in their coverage. It said the code does not allow the airing of violent, sensational, or alarming details that are not essential to factual reporting. It adds that failure to adhere to regulations will lead to penalties, including revocation of broadcast license and frequencies. Ambassadors from Malta, Mozambique, Switzerland, and the United Arab Emirates have announced a joint commitment to prioritize climate peace and security during their respective terms at the UN Security Council. Mozambique's ambassador to the Security Council, Pedro Comissário Afonso, says it's important for the Council to reaffirm its commitments in response to climate change.
Malta, Mozambique, Switzerland, and my own country, the United Arab Emirates, come together to show our commitment to prioritizing climate, peace and security during our respective terms on the UN Security Council. There is no doubt that climate change is the defining challenge of our time. There is no true security, in our views, without climate security.
As an island state, we are acutely aware of how ocean-related climate security risks can uproot communities, destroy areas of land, and threaten the existence of entire countries. Enhanced reporting to the Council on how climate change may be impacting particular situations on its agenda is critical to inform the Council's decision and decision-making.
As we take tangible steps to address, mitigate, and adapt to the implications of climate change, it is also important for the Security Council to meet its responsibility to recognize and take appropriate action in response to climate change.
The Security Council must enhance data collection and analysis on climate, peace and security. This would not only foster evidence-based approaches and responses to these challenges, but it could also improve early warning capabilities and prevention.
The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, says Somalia water crisis is far from over. Tens of thousands more people are projected to die from drought there. A new report from Somalia's government and the United Nations has found that 43,000 people in Somalia probably died from the drought last year, half of them children. It estimates that from January to June of this year, a further 25,000 people could die. However, Chief of Communication at the United Nations Children's Fund in Somalia, Victor Chinyama, said there was still time to save lives, recommending that aid agencies continue to provide safe water to communities that are stressed. He said more needs to be done to help Somali families grow their own food, as well as provide stronger healthcare, education, and protection for children. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says the global spread of cholera, particularly in Africa, has worsened since its last assessment in early February. 4 new countries now report cases of the disease, which are Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa, making 24 countries in total. Widespread outbreaks remain active in Malawi and Mozambique, and one in the Horn of Africa. Shortages of the oral cholera vaccine and overstretched health services mean that there's limited capacity to respond to the worsening situation. Elsewhere, the Global Commission on the Economics of Water is calling for a new collective approach to water and bold actions to secure a just and sustainable future for all. The GCEW provided the UN 2023 Water Conference with a first report with a fundamental reassessment of how water can be managed and valued, as well as its intrinsic role in the path to a more sustainable future.
We are today changing the entire hydrological cycle. We're pushing the water cycle out of balance. We can no longer trust the very source of all fresh water, precipitation, which we normally take for granted in all our planning. But we can not only focus on transboundary river basins of blue water runoff, but we also need to have collective action on managing the entire water cycle between countries. That's why we propose of defining water as a global common good and an asset that needs to be managed as a collective good. And we need to have an integrated approach that does not only focus on blue water runoff, but also green water, the soil moisture that powers all the photosynthesis, all the biomass, all the food security, meaning fresh water behind all the sustainable development goals.
Meanwhile, the reduction of water availability has led to manipulation of water to attain multidimensional interests, sometimes leading to conflicts at various levels, especially at the community level. This is the view of Bankole Adeoye, African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, who was speaking on the margins of the United Nations 2023 Water Conference. The summit was organized by Finland, the African Union Commission, Switzerland, and Senegal.
The strategic importance of water as a primary and secondary source of economic development on a continent places it in the front line of national interest, given the need that water can be a veritable tool for both economic growth and stability. The reduction of water availability has led to manipulation of water to attain multi-dimensional interest, sometimes leading to conflicts at various levels, especially at the community level. It is in this recognition of water scarcity and competition as a security issue that resulted in the establishment of the African Ministerial Conference on Water in 2002.
Other news, authorities in Mozambique say 3,000 kilometers of road and more than 30 bridges have been damaged in the center and north of the country as a result of Cyclone Freddy. Hundreds of people have been killed in Malawi, Madagascar, and Mozambique, and thousands of homes destroyed as a result of the deadly cyclone. Cyclone Freddy was one of the longest-lived storms ever recorded in the southern hemisphere, if not the whole world. Other matters now, Equatorial Guinea has confirmed 8 more cases of the Marburg virus disease, bringing the total to 9 since February when it was first declared. The World Health Organization said the cases of the viral hemorrhagic fever were confirmed following laboratory analysis of additional samples. It noted that there were 20 probable cases and deaths. The new cases were reported from areas bordering Cameroon and Gabon. The cases are from areas that are 50 kilometers apart, with the WHO suggesting a wider transmission of the virus. The World Health Organization says it's working with national authorities to step up emergency response measures to the disease. Meanwhile, Kenya and Uganda have increased surveillance on their borders with Tanzania after the Marburg virus killed 5 people in the neighboring country. High fever is a common symptom of the deadly Ebola-like virus, often followed by bleeding and organ failure. Uganda has ordered immediate screening and testing at its southern border. Health teams have also been put on high alert at border crossings in the districts of Cholera and Isingiro. On the other hand, Kenya's Health Director General Patrick Amof has advised members of the public to report any unusual increase in people who have a high fever and recently traveled to Tanzania. The virus is transmitted to people from fruit bats and spreads between humans through the transmission of bodily fluids. With the 5th 2013 Nelson Mandela, the first president of South Africa to be elected in a fully representative democratic election, as well as the country's first black head of state, died at the age of 95 after a prolonged respiratory infection. A special media breakfast to commemorate the 10th anniversary of Nelson Mandela's passing was held in Johannesburg to outline the initiatives to honor Madiba.
Where human beings are being oppressed, there is more work to be done. After nearly 90 years of life,
it's been 10 years since the global icon Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela died, and ahead of all the events to mark this later in the year. The Nelson Mandela Foundation says it is renewing its commitment to Madiba's values and continue to work of building a better world for all.
So we're hoping in this.
To many, Nelson Mandela showed the world that it was possible to overcome even the most entrenched divisions and build a society based on respect, dignity, and human rights. The Chief Executive Officer of Mandela Foundation, Sello Hatang, says hopefully the continent's leaders will draw inspiration from the global icon, as visionary leadership is still work in progress in Africa.
Those who are leading now are not leading with the same value system that Madiba had, a sense of selflessness, that you are there as a servant, not as the one who needs to be served, that you are there at the behest of your people. And I think if we are to begin to think like that, it means that we'll be bringing up more servant leaders.
Today we face many challenges as a global community. We are grappling with issues such as climate change, poverty, inequality, and conflict. July 18th is the UN-designated day to honor Nelson Mandela, and the head of Nelson Mandela Day Public Outreach, Gashua Brooks, outlined some of the key activities for this year's celebration.
What we're trying to do is try to help capacitate communities in growing their own food and actually take positive climate action. So we've embarked on, projects that, number one, we're planting trees, 60% of which are fruit trees. Second to that is obviously the capacitation of community gardens as well as home-based gardens.
As we mark this important anniversary, we celebrate and remember a man with many talents and accomplishments, a man who truly made a difference in Africa through his political ideology, and of course his contributions to the Bill of Rights and the country's now celebrated constitution. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channel Television News.
Still ahead on the program. Tunisia dismisses concerns expressed by the European Union, warning of economic collapse. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. We're still in South Africa, where the country's Foreign Minister, Naledi Pandor, says her government will have to discuss the arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court against Russian President Vladimir Putin before considering any action. Mr. Putin is scheduled to travel to South Africa for the BRICS summit in August, the conference that brings Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa together. Last week, the ICC issued an arrest warrant against Mr. Putin over alleged war crimes in Ukraine. As a signatory to the Rome Statute, which established the court, South Africa is legally bound to detain Mr. Putin and bring him to trial. Ms. Pandor said the South African authorities will first consult with the Russian side regarding the warrant. South Africa has closed diplomatic relations with Moscow in spite of Western condemnations. Last month, its navy held joint exercises with Russian forces off the coast of South Africa. It has also abstained during UN votes condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Elsewhere now, Tunisia has dismissed concerns expressed by the European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, warning of a looming economic collapse in the country. Mr. Borrell said that a very dangerous situation was developing in which new flows of migrants would head from the North African country to southern Europe. However, Tunisia's foreign ministry described the comments as overblown. Italy, which lies just north of Tunis, has expressed its fears of a Tunisian collapse. On Tuesday, the Italian Prime Minister said Rome was making every effort to ensure a proposed $2 billion IMF loan for Tunisia goes ahead. Nearly 200 people marched in Bangui, the capital of the Central Republican Republic, in support of China and Russia 4 days after 9 Chinese were killed at a mining site in the center of the country. The march began in the morning and ended midday at the foot of a monument which pays homage to the country's armed forces and its Russian allies. The demonstrators held up Russian flags and banners proclaiming support Russia and Russia is Wagner. We love Russia and we love Wagner, and laid a wreath of flowers in front of the Chinese embassy. However, a commission of inquiry has been set up and Chinese President Xi Jinping over the killings of 9 Chinese nationals in an attack on a mining site in central China. Mr. Xi has called for severe punishment for those responsible. In the meantime, cooperation between China and Africa is at a critical stage of movement to a higher level as China remains ready to work with African countries to overcome problems and challenges in innovative cooperation ideas and diversifying cooperation models under the framework of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. This is the thought and opinion of Wu Peng, the Director General of the Department of African Affairs at China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, during a proposal meeting of reports on Chinese investment in Africa 2023. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, was there and now reports.
China prides itself as one of Africa's largest and strongest trading partners, and by far its largest trading partner in agricultural goods. During a meeting focused on promoting the development of African industrial chain and enhancing the added value of African products seminar and proposal meeting of reports on Chinese investments in Africa, attended by diplomats and Chinese business leaders, Mr. Wu, speaking in Mandarin, reiterated China's increasing partnerships with Africa in all aspects, investing more than $120 billion and financing cooperation with African countries to improve their infrastructure and consolidate the foundation of industrialization. In his presentation given in French language, co-chair of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, who's also Senegal's ambassador to China, Mr. Ibrahim Silla, corroborated Mr. Wu's submission of cooperation between China and Africa, adding that Africa's goals of industrialization are stated in the AU's Agenda 2063. He raises a concern, however, of Africa's exports to China, which model is still at the level of mineral resources and agricultural products. Among the lineup of speakers is the UN resident coordinator in China, Mr. Siddharth Chatterjee, who announces the UN's next line of action, the setting up of an SDG fund.
What I'm now doing is establishing a joint Sustainable Development Goal Fund, into which I will attract catalytic financing in order to give velocity to countries in our South-South cooperation framework, to bring together the UN system to be able to better support, assist, provide the best technical guidance, and drive and support private enterprise, state enterprise, governments to look at where we can do big ticket items. And why am I saying this? In the next 7 years, agribusiness in Africa is going to be $1 trillion worth.
The meeting then goes into keynote speeches where the CEO, Development Reimagined, Hannah Ryder, proposes an agreement between China's Belt and Road Initiative with Africa's Continental Free Trade Agreement area as solution to increasing African exports to China.
A preferential agreement that links China's Belt and Road Initiative to the entire African Continental Free Trade area, with zero tariffs on raw and value-added products from every single African country is crucial and will help to shift these kinds of patterns. This is also why, as agreed in the FOCAC 2021 Action Plan, progress on negotiating geographical indications is necessary to also protect the value of African raw agricultural products, from coffee to wine, cotton, kente, which I'm wearing right now, into China.
For Chinese businesses in Africa, policy stabilization is a key factor to help speed up industrial growth.
We need a clear industry policy, and that policy is supposed to be sustainable.
Coming just weeks after China's political season, Chinese and African leaders will continue to engage on a deeper level to ensure a workable plan to help the continent achieve its industrialization goals. From Beijing, China, I'm Arachi Ubani, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin says the country is willing to enhance communications with Ghana to seek a proper resolution of its debt problem. Ghana, which is struggling with its worst economic crisis in a generation, secured a staff-level agreement with the International Monetary Fund in December for a $3 billion loan. China is Ghana's biggest bilateral creditor with about $1.7 billion of debt.
We attach great importance to Ghana's debt problem, understand the difficulties currently faced by the Ghana side, and are willing to strengthen communication and consultation with Ghana to seek a proper solution to the debt problem and debt difficulties faced by Ghana. We have also been advocating that a proper solution to Ghana's debt problem requires a joint effort of the Ghana side and all international partners. Multilateral financial institutions and commercial creditors, as major creditors of developing countries, should participate in debt reduction initiatives for developing countries.
And finally on the program, a group of activists have been walking from Mali to Burkina Faso in a bid to promote states federation. The group is using the walk as a means to call on the government to move towards federation between both countries. They want states to harmonize the two Western African states, pushing for stronger armies, security policies, and developmental strategies.
A small group of activists are walking from Mali's capital Bamako to Burkina Faso's capital Ouagadougou to express their support for a federation between the two West African states. Holding the flags of both countries and the African Union, the group of about a dozen men and women walked single file this weekend on the side of a road surrounded by scrubland near Yaoundé in western Burkina Faso. They wore placards with the distance they plan to cover, 862 kilometers, or about 536 miles. They left Bamako on February 27th.
Today, we want to push our governments, our institutions, and our people to move towards a federation, because we believe that only a federation can be the global and definitive solution for Africa.
The prime ministers of Mali and Burkina Faso held a joint press conference last month where they said they would examine the idea of creating a federation.
on the federation which our two heads of state hold dearly. We have decided to work very closely on this between now and the holding of a mixed commission in Burkina Faso. We understand there's already been a commission specifically set up at the foreign ministry level to address this question.
The two countries share a long border and face similar challenges. They are both ruled by military juntas which ousted their democratic government in the last 2 years, largely out of frustration and worsening insecurity as Islamist militants step up attacks.
That's the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers. Bye for now.